Good afternoon and good morning. Welcome to the Women in Tech series brought to you by the GBTA Tech Committee. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about a study I recently read that was conducted by Adeva IT in 2018, where it stated that women held only 25% of all the jobs in the tech industry, despite women making up almost half of the total workforce. What's worse is that number is actually lower than the percentage of tech jobs held by women as far back as the 80s. And I'm giving away my age because I do remember the 80s. But let's face it, tech still has an issue with gender diversity. The tech sector sadly lags behind the rest of the job market when it comes to hiring women. As the percentage of employed women across all job sectors continues to grow, we still see even the 5 largest tech companies on the planet, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Apple, only have a workforce of about 34%. So even though it's a little bit better than 25, it's still not up to the average across all industries. So with these numbers in mind, we on the GBTA Tech Committee created the Women in Tech series so that executives in the travel industry could share their stories to encourage other women to blaze a career path in technology. Our plan is to deliver new insights every month in multiple formats to maximize participation, mentorship, and education in the travel technology industry. For our inaugural session during Women's History Month in the US, of course, I couldn't think of 2 better people than to kick off this series. So please welcome my 2 friends and collaborators, Anthea Crittle, the chairperson of the GBTA Tech Committee, and Claudia Batten, the chairperson of Serko. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mike. And just hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm delighted to be joined by Claudia Batten for our discussion today in the inaugural Women in Technology series. Claudia is an experienced technology executive and has been a founding member of 2 highly successful entrepreneurial ventures. The first venture was Massive Incorporated, a network for advertising in video games where she helped pioneer digital as a media buy before selling the organization to Microsoft in 2006. In 2009, she co-founded Victors and Spoils, the first advertising agency built on the principles of crowdsourcing, which was then acquired by Havas Worldwide in 2011. From her base in California, Claudia is a strong supporter of the startup scene as an active mentor and advisor. In addition to her position as chair of the board of directors for Serko, she is also the digital advisor to one of the largest banking organizations in Australasia. So really excited to have Claudia on the discussion today. Welcome, Claudia. I think to kick things off, we've all been working from home. Last year has been really interesting in terms of the impact of COVID. So to kick us off, we've all been at home, I guess, watching Netflix. What is your favorite show to binge on Netflix?
So pre-pandemic, Orange is the New Black, like all the way, have to give that massive snaps. During the pandemic, the 2 shows I've loved, one is Abstract for kind of inspiration and some good nerdery. There's some excellent content there. And then Chef with Jon Favreau, which has been really inspiring me to cook some new recipes. We've all been doing a lot more cooking. So I've really loved to binge some of the cooking shows.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that, in terms of the cooking shows, if we were able to all get out and be dining at restaurants again, would we find you at a dive bar or in a fine dining establishment?
I'm like fine dining without the fuss. So if I can have fine dining with a little kind of dive bar overtone, that would be my happy place.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, this is a series for the Business Travel Association. So I have to ask, preferred vacation spot, beach or mountains?
I mean, anywhere right now. Just, yes, please.
Yeah, I think we're all keen to get back on the road as soon as possible, as soon as things open up again.
Yes.
So I thought we would kick things off by asking a little bit more about how you found yourself working in technology. I think reading through your background and understanding this, it's really interesting. So how did you come to find yourself working in technology?
Sure. So I'm going to age myself. So I'll kind of align myself with Mike on this one. I kind of hadn't set out to have a tech career, but it kept finding me. Like no matter what I did, there was always like, tech would find me. And so, it really for me goes back to when I was a lawyer. And actually when I was studying law, I did a paper on whether we should be protecting software through copyright or patent protection. So nerdy, I know, but that was one of my honors papers. And then as I went into my first law job, I did early Y2K work, so showing my age. And I also did a big research paper on the tax implications of e-commerce. I think I was part of, e-commerce really in a very, very early stage. And it just kind of never left me from there. No matter what I did, it's just been tech all the way.
Yeah. And then furthering on from that, how did you make the transition to board member? I think it's a really interesting step to go from board member and also chair of the board. Often when we look at progressing to join a board, they're looking for experience as a board member already. So how do you make that first transition to board member and progress to chair of the board?
So accidentally, as with most things in my life, I'm very curious. So I always orient myself to learning experiences. And so after I'd exited both of my first two companies, I was asked to do some startup board work. And I was just interested in helping, frankly, and kind of curious about what it meant to be a board member, a board director. And from there, just got more and more opportunities and kept saying yes because they were interesting to me. So when Serko asked me if I would join their board, they were doing an IPO in New Zealand and I hadn't had that experience. So I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And then, hours and hours and hours and hours of work later, we get to a really great place, which we are right now with Serko. And then I guess the chair role was super interesting. And I think, I've reflected on this a lot. I really struggled with whether I should do that or not, and whether, frankly, I was good enough to do that because we had an extraordinary chair already at Serko. And it was very hard for me to compare myself to him. And I realized that actually wasn't the point. And Darren had asked me to do it. He and Bob had massive confidence in me. And I realized that my strengths and my skills and my strengths were ones that Serko needed right now to get it to where we're going. So, it's been this very accidental path with a lot of curiosity baked into it. And I would say, a lot of reflection on my relation with imposter syndrome, and me kind of moving through acknowledging that I am good enough to do this work. And I love it now. Like, I absolutely love it. That's the thing that surprises me the most. I get very, very energized about the work I'm doing.
Yeah, and one of the things that, in preparation for this interview, one of the things I did was have a look at the list of the Fortune 500. And from the list in 2020, women held 7.4% of Fortune 500 CEO roles. What do you think of this, and how important is it to get women's seats at the board table?
I mean, I think it's critically important. And I would say, this is the diversity conversation. There's plenty of evidence that a diverse board, which starts with gender balance, but then we need to expand that with, considerations of age, of socioeconomic status, of race. There's so many reasons to bring diversity into a board table, into a boardroom, because we want lots of different ideas. Like if we're all the same, we've all got the same experience, we're all going to look at the problem through the same lens. And that's not super helpful when you're trying to build something enormous, when you're trying to build something that's never been built before. We want lots of ideas, lots of critical thinking, and, diversity. Yes, we're starting that with gender diversity. but we really need to actually even expand our thinking there. So we're super, super, super behind in this whole thing. We need to figure out a way of accelerating.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about that, I think diversity is really important, and bringing different ideas to the table. What do you think women would bring at an executive level to travel technology companies?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think what women bring generally is an intuitive way of thinking about problems. So we, my experience, I can't speak for all women, but by and large, there's an understanding that women embrace what they call the softer skills. So thinking about thinking from an intuitive perspective, a lot of more human behavior considerations. And that all sounds, the soft skills sounds like a demeaning negative thing, like we need to be hard and tough and blah, blah, blah. And that's how you win in commerce. But actually where we're at right now is for us to win, we need to get the best out of our people. And so I think that perspective, I'm certainly noticing that more intuitive perspective, that more curiosity around how our people are doing. And also I think there's some design elements that women notice that men don't necessarily. I hate talking categorically from a gender perspective because it is a spectrum. And I can get really masculine and there are some guys who have these wonderful soft skills. So I think at the end of the day, you want to do a good skill analysis in any corporation or any board or any executive team and make sure you've got representations from all of the different kind of areas that you think are critical to growing your business. So that's the place I'd start from. That's the kind of first principles design place I start from. And then I want to layer in all the different people. And I do want a hard probing person. I want a reflective, caring person. And they don't have to be the genders that you might think that they would be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is really important to address this. One of the stats that Mike mentioned at the beginning of the call was around the percentage of women in the 5 largest tech companies, and that being so far behind the percentage of women employed across all job sectors. So when we think about this, with specific reference to technology and that being behind the overall job sector market in the US, how do we get more women into technology from the outset?
Well, there's so many pieces to this. And I think, the first thing is orientation from a corporate standpoint. We have a duty to our shareholders. Bottom line, we need to maximize our output, and that delivers to our shareholders. And the way we do that is by being the best corporation that we can be. And to be the best corporation we can be, we've just talked about this, we need a really diverse workforce. So we have to stop sitting in this numbers game that we're playing and get to a place of going, we have to do better. We're having a similar conversation right now around sustainability, right? We have to do better. We have to commit to this. What are we going to do? And I think what happens is we go, oh yeah, we should be there, but it's really hard and there's not enough women and I'm trying. And, I talked to a friend of mine who's the head of a tech company in New Zealand, and he has 100% women on his executive team. And, I think you could argue that's not diverse as well, but he's really proud of that, and rightly he should be. And he said, I just got determined. And once you get determined, it's actually not as hard as you think that it might be. So that's one piece of the puzzle. There are actually many pieces to the puzzle, but the second piece I would add, to keep this short and sweet, is we also have to really look at how we're raising our children. We have to really take responsibility for this. As an aunt, I'm really motivated to make sure that my niece is playing with Lego as much as my nephew is thinking creatively, is open to lots of different jobs and career paths. And the same, I would say, of how I mentor. And, I mentor a huge number of women, and I really basically try not to turn any down. And we've got to make that commitment. Like, we've got to step up and probably mentor a few more people than we think we should. And also, I'll add, look at this through a diversity lens and not just a gender lens. So, I have to own the fact that I'm actually mostly mentoring white women. And that's not good. I've got to really work on making sure I expose myself, because it's good for me to get, different opinions and different women around me, and also good for them. So, I think there's a place where we can all look critically at what we're doing and what we're not doing, and work to evolve that and step our own game up, and not just kind of going, it's not my problem. It's all of our problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've been talking a lot about diversity and inclusion, and the importance of that. I'd be really interested to hear, in terms of your leadership, what do you try to instill in your own leadership in terms of managing your employees with respect to D&I?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. It's tricky from a governance perspective, and there's a real difference between governance and actually being an executive and actually having that hands-on hiring role, recruiting role. The first thing I would say, with all the boards I'm on and beyond just Serko, I'm always looking at our numbers. I'm always looking at the makeup of our exec team, and actually looking a layer or two layers below. So really looking at the recruiting funnel, really looking at how our tech team, the composition of our tech team is versus the whole corporation. And this is another thing that we've really got to look hard at. Typically in a tech company, the women are not in the tech roles. So there's a piece there, and, we are good at what we're good at. So I'm not suggesting that we have to force people into roles that don't light them up. That's rule number one. People have to just absolutely dig and be passionate about what they're doing. But beyond that, what are we actually doing to really grow our diversity in each team, and not from an overall makeup of the company? And then I guess at the end of the day, from a leadership standpoint, from a governance standpoint, I really do care about how we're taking care of our people. Like, what are we doing around well-being? I mean, especially right now, that issue's been really top of mind. But what are we really doing? Because it's so easy to say, jazz hands, we need a well-being program, or, jazz hands, health and safety, or all of these things, and just kind of look at the numbers. But if you dig a layer or two down and really talk to the humans in your organizations and find out how they're doing, you get real information that helps you think about what you need to shift. And most of the companies I work with are global. And so the impact of how people are doing in the UK versus the US versus, Australasia, they're really different. And understanding that piece as well, I think, is really important. Otherwise, from a governance perspective, you're taking what's been said as gospel. And I think it's really important to kind of scratch at that and get down a couple of layers and really understand, is what I'm hearing right? Or is it just the orientation of the people who are telling me that versus what's really going on? So that's a little bit of how I think about these things. Yeah.
And I think I'm going to switch topics a little bit, reflecting on the past year, which has been just extraordinary. There's been such a dramatic impact around the world. Most people are working from home. Work-life balance has been impacted. As you think about this, do you think there's an opportunity now to reset the balance following the pandemic? And what have you learned over the past year?
The big question. We've had this just phenomenal amount of change thrown at us over the last year. And most of us have been in some state of just trying to keep our head above water for whatever reason. And, I'm very fortunate that I don't have little kids at home with me. I mean, my friends who've got kids, I literally do not know how they're doing this. I feel useless saying, how can I help? But, those are the words that immediately come out of my mouth. So, we've had this massive amount of change, and it's really easy to just get kind of caught up in coping. And I think that there's always an opportunity. There's a lot of trauma always in change. It's a necessary part of the change journey, but there's always opportunities. So I love this question, and it's a question I think we all need to ask ourselves is, okay, sure, a lot of stuff's not working, but what is working, and what are some shifts that I want to make? So I think this is an amazing question. For me, I'm realizing that I miss my time in planes. And so one of the big things that I'm doing consistently now is like locking days out as like flying days, so that I can actually, get the work done that I used to get done on the plane. I was always like hyper efficient on the plane. So that's like one thing. I'm very oriented to productivity. And so that's been one of my reflections. And I think I'd make that a bit of a bigger reflection. Where can you find some efficiencies that maybe you couldn't before? Like, I think initially a lot of us, we stopped our commute, but then we filled up our time with Zoom meetings. How can you switch that and maybe take a plane day every week and reduce your calls and reduce your email and actually work on some big projects? I'm a massive fan of Paul Graham's Maker Time kind of thinking, and we spend so much time like just doing stuff, but where are we thinking? Where are we being creative? Where are we working actively on big projects? And then the final thing I would say is I'm realizing that I need a lot less in my life than I thought that I did. And so, I've always been really interested in the minimalism movement. I've always been interested in conscious consumption. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, we all went crazy buying. I mean, I had backups to my backups to my backups. We were all worried that we'd run out of just about everything, not limited to toilet paper, though that was the big one, right? And now on the back end of that, I'm like, what do I actually really need in my life? And so there is this opportunity both in, the stuff that we have around us and the stuff that we fill our lives up with to start to find out from Marie Kondo's perspective what sparks joy for us and what's maybe just getting in our way that we don't need. So those are a few of my reflections.
Yeah, I love your idea of, and I hadn't thought about this, but I love your idea of blocking out time as flying days. I think I'm going to implement that one myself as well. I love it.
Awesome.
So I think, broad topic, but, as we're kind of, recovering from this and transitioning from, the past year into recovering from COVID, what do you see as the latest upcoming trends in technology that we should all be aware of and mindful of, as we're going through this recovery, and that could even help with the recovery in our day-to-day roles?
So I'm going to take a slightly unusual angle on this question. I was thinking about this. I'd seen the questions in advance. And I mean, I'm a tech junkie. I get so excited about every new whiz-bangy thing. And I'm super interested. I think there's some really, really rocking stuff that's going to come through from a predictive modeling and a machine learning and a more global AI standpoint. That certainly for us in the travel industry, like that's the edge that we're really interested in at Serko, and that I'm personally really interested in. And the reason I point at this and my slightly unusual kind of angle on this question is I think we've been just too fast to grab hold of tech without thinking about how this can enhance us as humans and help us as humans. And so I keep thinking about email particularly. It's my one frustration. Like, I love email in many, many ways. If I go back to my early law days, it was the thing that allowed you to actually, like that, and a smartphone allowed you to get out of the office. Yeah. And you knew that your client would call when they needed something, and you could, pull up the document or whatever. There's like a lot of positive in that. And I was at this weird place where they were literally just getting rid of the fax machines. I mean, it's horrifying, but they were literally just getting rid of the fax machines, and desktops were coming in the year that I started. So I saw people kind of tied to the office with these faxes come in, right? So there's a huge positive gain in that. But the problem is now our inbox is everybody else's demand on our time. And what do we do in the morning? We wake up and we look at our email or Instagram or Facebook or whatever, which is everybody else's, decision making on what should be important in my life. And I'm like, that's wrong. Like the right orientation of this is, what do I need to do to advance my goals today? not what's going to advance everybody else's goals. So for me, email is dumb. Social media is dumb. None of these things are helping me kind of go, this is my mission in life. This is what I'm interested in. Give me that information on so I'm super, super interested in us not running to the latest piece of tech just because, it's cool. And, there's like this little bit of life enhancing like email was. I'm really, really interested in how we can use all this stuff, and particularly for travel. Because, man, I've used some of these ugly booking tools in my day, and I love what we've created at Serko. It's like part of why I even signed up for all of this, because I'm like, booking travel is ugly. It needs to be awesome and beautiful and easy. And that's how I think we should be thinking about all tech, is how can this be this power up positive experience that makes our life way simpler? Because I'd rather be going to a great yoga class in New York rather than dealing with checking into my hotel or changing my flight because my meeting's canceled or whatever it is. So that's kind of what I'm looking at from a tech standpoint. I got very excited there. That's
Absolutely. I think, we all would like that, and sign me up for more of that. And I think, finally, as you kind of look back on your journey, how you ended up in technology and a chair of the board, is there anything you would say now to your younger self when you embarked on your career as you look back at that journey?
I think, my advice for everyone I work with, that would have been my advice for me, is embrace your weirdness. And as I say that, I'm not saying be weird, though for sure be weird if that's you. But we're all so busy trying to be the same. We get so caught up in comparing ourselves to everyone else, and that's really dull and boring. And it's our uniqueness that's going to take us to great places. It's my uniqueness that makes me the right chair for Serko right now. It's Simon's uniqueness that made him the great chair for Serko before me. And so I think, for young people, and even for anyone right now, we all need this reminder, is to the things that we are good at, the things that bring joy to our life, the things that we're naturally interested in, are the things that are going to make us real assets for the work we're doing. So, being a director, I'm not sure that I knew that would be a great thing for me, and I love it. It's like the perfect composite of my legal work and my entrepreneurship and my just desperate curiosity for everything that's going on in the world, and my love of people and my desire for people to be great in their work life. So it's a brilliant combination of everything that I'm good at. There are other things that I won't be great at because that's my combination of unique skills. So embrace your weirdness. That would be my advice to myself and to everybody else that's listening.
I'm with you on that. And is there anything else before we close out that you wanted to share with the audience?
I want to reiterate the power of reflection on the back end of the year we've just gone through. I am a massive proponent of embracing the change journey for all the trauma and discomfort that it brings. There is just remarkable opportunity on the other side of what we've just gone through for us personally, professionally, and for the world, to be completely frank. So, don't race back to normal. Not that I think that's even going to be a possible thing, really, but the normal is old. We're in a new world now. So figure out what your place is in that, and work through the discomfort and the trauma, because there's great light on the other side of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Claudia, thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this webinar series. It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed listening to your experiences, your lessons learned, and your journey. So thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this, and for sharing all of that today. Thank you.
So great. Thank you for having me.
All right. And before we close out and I hand back to Mike, I do just want to say thank you to everyone for listening, and I hope you enjoyed hearing from Claudia as much as I did.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anthea, and thank you, Claudia. That was very inspiring, and I loved it when you said, if you're going to build something big, you can't all have the same point of view at the board table. And I can't think of a better argument for diversity than that. And that's very inspiring. So for all you out there in the audience, please take that to heart. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next month. I'm not going to tell you who we have lined up yet, but it'll be a surprise. But really appreciate you joining us. And if you do know a woman in tech and you'd like to nominate them for part of this series, just send an email to Anthea or myself, or you can find us out on LinkedIn. Thank you so much and have a good day.